I overheard my adopted son on the phone describing my tragic accident that hasn't happened yet. Every detail planned. I recorded everything, stayed silent. When he tried to stage it 2 months later, detectives were waiting. Before we continue, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to hear my story. If you're comfortable, let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is where you are. Now let me tell you my story. I wasn't supposed to hear that phone call. That's what saved my life. It was a Thursday afternoon in October, unseasonably warm for Chicago. I was in my upstairs bathroom, the one with the temperamental faucet I'd been meaning to fix for weeks. My adopted son Brandon was staying with me that week. He'd asked if he could visit for a few days to clear his head. Said he needed time away from the city, needed his mother's company. I'd said yes. Of course. I'd adopted Brandon when he was 8 years old. After his biological mother, my best friend Maria, died in a car accident. I'd raised him as my own for the past 29 years. I was 69 years old, living alone in the Bronzeville neighborhood home I'd lived in for 40 years. The house my late husband James and I had bought when we were newlyweds. Brandon was in the guest room directly below the bathroom where I stood. And that's when I heard his voice. Clear. Distinct, traveling through the old heating vent that connected the 2 floors. At first I wasn't paying attention. Just ambient noise while I worked on the faucet. But then certain words penetrated my consciousness. Accident. Tomorrow morning. Concrete floor. Head trauma. I froze. Wrench in hand. Listened. Brandon's voice was calm, businesslike, discussing something with whoever was on the other end of that phone call. Yeah, the accident happens on the back stairs. She goes down every morning at exactly 6 a.m. for coffee, like clockwork. Routine never changes. My back stairs. My morning routine. He was talking about me. I'll loosen the railing tonight. Saw partway through the support beam. When she puts her weight on it tomorrow morning, the whole thing gives way. 15-foot fall onto the concrete basement floor. I stopped breathing. Elderly woman, bad fall, severe head trauma. It'll look completely natural. Tragic accident. I set the wrench down silently, pulled out my phone, started the voice recording app with shaking hands. Brandon continued, I've already been telling people she's been unsteady lately. Forgetting things, everyone will expect it. Poor mom. She was getting so frail, no one will question it. A pause while he listened to the other person. After the funeral, I'm the executor. I get the estate liquidated fast, pay off my debts, buy that condo in Miami, $4.5 million. That's what she's worth. My entire estate. He'd calculated it precisely. This time tomorrow, problem solved. The old lady takes her morning trip down the back stairs. The railing fails. She falls 15 feet onto concrete, and I inherit everything. Another pause. Yeah, I'm sure. I've thought this through. No one suspects anything. I'm the devoted son staying with his elderly mother, helping her around the house. When the accident happens, I'll be the one who finds her, calls 911, plays the devastated son. Perfect. He laughed. Actually laughed. Trust me, by tomorrow afternoon, I'll be $4.5 million richer, and mom will be in the morgue. He hung up. I stood in that bathroom, phone clutched in my hand, recording still running, trying to process what I'd just heard. My adopted son, the boy I'd taken in when he was orphaned at 8, the young man I'd raised as my own, supported through college and 3 failed business ventures, had just described in precise detail how he planned to murder me. Tomorrow morning. By sabotaging my back staircase. I looked at my phone. The recording had captured everything. Every word. I had evidence. But evidence of what? A plan that hadn't been executed yet. I needed to think. Needed to see if he'd already started. After 20 minutes, when I heard Brandon leave the house, said he was going to run errands, I went downstairs. To the back staircase. The narrow wooden stairs that led from the kitchen down to my basement, 15 feet, steep angle, concrete floor at the bottom. Stairs I'd walked down every single morning for 40 years to get to the coffee maker I kept in the basement kitchenette. I examined the railing. It was loose. Not just old house loose, deliberately loosened. I could see where screws had been removed. And the support beam, the main vertical post that held the railing system, had fresh saw marks. Someone had taken a saw and cut partway through the beam, stopping just before it would break completely. Engineered to fail under pressure. Under my weight. I ran my fingers over the saw marks. Fresh wood exposed. This had been done recently. Brandon had already started. The plan wasn't just talk, He'd already begun sabotaging the structure. Tomorrow morning when I went down these stairs at 6 a.m. like I did every morning, I'd put my hand on this railing, lean my weight as I always did, and the whole thing would collapse. I'd fall 15 feet onto concrete. At 69 years old, that fall would likely kill me, or cause severe traumatic brain injury. And it would look like a tragic accident. Exactly as Brandon had described. I stood there, one hand on the sabotaged railing, and felt something shift inside me. Not panic, not fear, rage. Cold, calculated rage. Because I'm not just some elderly woman living alone. I'm Dr. Dorothy Sullivan. I have a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Northwestern University, and a Master of Science in Structural Engineering from MIT. I spent 40 years as a structural engineer specializing in building safety, structural failures and accident investigation. I've testified as an expert witness in 32 lawsuits involving building collapses, construction accidents and structural failures. 6 of those cases involved proving that accidents were actually murder attempts. Staged falls, deliberately weakened structures, sabotage disguised as negligence. I literally wrote papers on forensic structural analysis, how to determine whether a structural failure was accidental or intentional. And my adopted son, who knew nothing about my expertise beyond mom was an engineer, had just tried to stage my murder using the exact techniques I'd spent decades learning to detect. That was his first mistake. His second mistake would be underestimating what I was willing to do about it. I pulled out my phone and called the one person I knew would understand immediately. Detective Marcia Chen answered on the second ring. Dorothy, everything okay? Marcia and I had worked together on 5 cases over the years, structural failure investigations where police suspected foul play and needed an engineer's analysis. We'd become friends. Good friends. Marcia, my adopted son is planning to murder me tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. I have him on recording describing exactly how he's going to do it. And I need your help. Silence for 3 seconds. Then, I'm on my way. Don't touch anything. Don't let him know you know. Act completely normal. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She hung up. I went back upstairs, checked that the recording was saved to cloud storage, and made backup copies. Then I started photographing the sabotaged staircase. Not just casual photos. Engineering documentation. Close-ups of the saw marks with a ruler showing depth and angle. Photos of the loosened railing with measurements. Wide shots showing the entire structure and the concrete floor below. I documented everything the way I documented hundreds of structural failures in my career. Precise. Methodical, admissible in court. Then I went to Brandon's room. He'd left in a hurry, hadn't locked the door. On his desk, I found a notebook. Inside pages of notes about my daily routine, times I woke up, when I went downstairs, where I went during the day. He'd been studying me, planning this. There were also printouts articles about accidental fall statistics in elderly women, how to stage accidents, inheritance law in Illinois. And a rough sketch of my back staircase with an X marked where I would fall. I photographed every page. By the time Detective Chen arrived with her partner Detective James Torres, I had a complete evidence file. They sat in my living room and listened to the recording. Brandon's voice filled the room casually describing my murder. When it finished, Detective Torres looked at me with something like awe. Miss Sullivan, this is premeditated murder. We can arrest him right now. No, I said firmly. They both looked at me. If you arrest him now, he'll claim it was just talk, that the stairs were already loose from age, that he was discussing a hypothetical scenario with a friend. You'll have a recording of him talking but no proof he actually intended to go through with it. Detective Chen leaned forward. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we let him try. Dorothy, I want him caught in the act. I want proof that he not only planned this but actually attempted it. I want an airtight case that sends him to prison for 25 years. That's extremely dangerous. Torres said, what if something goes wrong? I looked at him steadily. I'm a structural engineer with 40 years of experience. I know exactly how to make this safe while making him think it's working. I pulled out a notepad and sketched the plan. Tonight, after Brandon goes to sleep, I'll reinforce the staircase. I'll add hidden support beams and safety cables that make it structurally impossible to collapse. But cosmetically it'll still look like his sabotage is in place. You can do that? Chen asked. I've designed buildings that can withstand earthquakes. I can certainly design a staircase that looks dangerous but is actually safe. I continued sketching. Tomorrow morning I go down those stairs at 6 a.m. like I always do. Brandon will be watching, waiting, the railing will appear to give way. I'll make sure it does in a controlled manner. I'll fall but the safety systems I install will catch me. It'll look like his plan worked. And then? Torres asked. And then Brandon will come to check if I'm dead. That's when you arrest him, caught at the scene of his attempted murder with all the premeditation evidence, the sabotage and the attempt itself. Detective Chen and Torres looked at each other. This is highly irregular, Torres said. So is an adopted son sawing through his mother's staircase to kill her for inheritance money? I replied. I want him caught, completely, irrefutably. No chance of him walking away from this. Chen made a decision. All right, but we do this my way. Full surveillance, multiple officers on site, medical team on standby. At the first sign something's going wrong, we abort and move in immediately. Agreed. We spent the next 4 hours planning every detail. Detective Chen made phone calls, coordinating with her captain, arranging for additional officers and equipment. Detective Torres went over every possible scenario, what could go wrong, how to prevent it, backup plans for the backup plans. I reviewed my engineering calculations, double-checking the load-bearing capacity of the support system I planned to install, making sure the safety cables would hold my weight with a margin of error large enough to account for any unexpected variables. We discussed timing, positioning, communication protocols. By the time we finished it was nearly 5 p.m. Brandon returned home around 6 p.m., cheerful and relaxed. How was your day, Mom? He asked, giving me a hug. A hug from someone who'd been planning my murder. I forced myself not to stiffen, not to pull away. I smiled at him. Wonderful, sweetheart. Just a quiet day at home. You seem a little tired. Maybe you should be extra careful on those stairs tomorrow morning. I noticed the railing seems a bit loose. I should probably fix that for you. He was already building his narrative. The concerned son who'd noticed a problem. Oh, I'll be careful. I said lightly, thank you for worrying about me. Inside I was screaming, how could he stand there, pretending to care about my safety when he'd just spent the day planning my death. We had dinner together. I'd made his favorite chicken parmesan, the same dish I'd made for him countless times throughout his childhood. He ate enthusiastically, complimenting my cooking, telling me stories about his week, acting like a normal son having a normal dinner with his mother. Not like someone who'd calculated my net worth and decided I was worth more dead than alive. After dinner, Brandon went to his room early. Big day tomorrow, he said, stretching. I want to get a good night's sleep. I bet you do, I thought. I cleaned the kitchen, moving on autopilot, my mind racing through everything that would happen in the next 12 hours. At 11 p.m., after I was certain Brandon was asleep, Detective Chen and 3 other officers entered through my back door. I'd left it unlocked for them, as planned. They moved silently through my house, checking to make sure Brandon was actually asleep before we began. One officer stayed upstairs, positioned where he could monitor Brandon's room, and alert us if he woke up. The rest of us went down to the basement. I'd already assembled the materials I needed from my garage. Steel cables, metal brackets, wooden supports, crash pads, tools. For the next 3 hours I installed hidden support beams inside the staircase structure, using techniques I developed over 4 decades of structural engineering. The beams were anchored to the floor joists above and the concrete foundation below, creating a secondary support system that would prevent catastrophic failure. I ran steel safety cables, the kind used in professional stunt work and rock climbing, through discrete anchor points I drilled into the staircase framework. The cables were rated for loads far exceeding my body weight, with a rigging system that would catch me within the first foot of any fall. I installed crash pads at the bottom, industrial-grade foam padding hidden behind storage boxes where Brandon wouldn't see them from above. Then I tested everything. I put my full weight on the sabotaged railing. It gave way as expected, but the hidden support system held firm. The safety cables engaged smoothly, lowering me in a controlled descent to the crash pads below. I climbed back up and tested it twice more, making minor adjustments to ensure the fall would look realistic from Brandon's vantage point while remaining completely safe. The staircase was now structurally sound and impossible to collapse in a way that could harm me. But from above, it still looked exactly like Brandon's sabotage: loose railing, partially sawn support beam. This is incredible, one of the officers whispered, watching me work. You're basically building a movie stunt rig. Structural engineering, I said, adjusting a cable tension. It's problem solving at its most precise. The challenge isn't just making something that works, it's making something that looks like it doesn't work while actually being completely safe. We installed 6 hidden cameras covering every angle of the staircase. High-definition cameras with excellent low-light capability positioned to capture everything from multiple perspectives. Detective Chen set up a command post in my basement, behind the false wall with monitors showing all 6 camera feeds plus audio from multiple microphones. "We'll see and hear everything," she said. "The moment he comes down or shows any sign of escalating beyond the plan, we move in immediately." 2 officers would be hidden in the basement, behind the false wall I'd created years ago for storage. 2 more would be stationed outside my back door, ready to enter on signal. Detective Torres would be in an unmarked van across the street, coordinating the response team, all of them waiting for 6 a.m. By 2 a.m. everything was ready. The officers took their positions, settling in for the long wait. I went to my bedroom but didn't sleep. Just lay there in the darkness, thinking about Brandon. I remembered the day I'd first met him. He was 8 years old, small for his age, with Maria's eyes and a grief that seemed too large for his tiny body to contain. Maria had been my best friend since college. When she died in that car accident, leaving Brandon alone, there was never any question about what I would do. James and I had been unable to have children of our own. Taking in Brandon felt like a gift, despite the tragic circumstances. I remembered his first night in our house, how he'd cried himself to sleep, calling for his mother. How I'd sat beside his bed, holding his hand, promising him he'd be safe, that he'd be loved. I'd kept that promise for 29 years. I'd been there for every milestone, every birthday, every school play, every triumph and heartbreak. I'd paid for his college education, helped him through 3 failed business ventures, supported him emotionally and financially more times than I could count. And tomorrow morning he was planning to watch me fall to my death so he could inherit my money. The boy I'd raised, the son I'd chosen. I must have dozed off at some point, because my alarm jolted me awake at 5:45 a.m. I got dressed slowly, deliberately, put on comfortable clothes suitable for my normal morning routine, added the necklace that held the hidden body camera Detective Chen had given me the night before. My hands were steady as I braided my hair, applied a little moisturizer, went through the motions of an ordinary morning. But this wasn't an ordinary morning. This was the morning my adopted son had chosen to murder me. At 5:58 a.m. I heard Brandon's door open quietly. He was awake, listening, waiting for the sound of my footsteps heading toward the back staircase, waiting for the crash, the scream, the silence. I took a deep breath and walked out of my bedroom. Went through my normal morning routine as if nothing was wrong, used the bathroom, washed my hands, checked my appearance in the mirror one last time. At exactly 6:00 a.m., I walked to the back staircase. The staircase Brandon had sabotaged. The staircase he expected to kill me. I could feel him somewhere above, listening intently, waiting to hear the sounds of my death. I started down the stairs, one hand on the railing, the sabotaged railing. My heart was pounding, but my engineering training kept me calm. I knew exactly what would happen. I'd designed every aspect of this controlled fall. The mathematics were sound, the safety systems were redundant and tested. Still, there's a difference between knowing something intellectually and actually doing it. Halfway down, at the precise point Brandon had engineered for the railing to fail, I let my full weight lean on it, just as I would naturally do every morning. The railing gave way, exactly as I'd designed it to, exactly as Brandon had sabotaged it to. I screamed, a genuine sound of fear that required no acting. Dropped. The safety cables caught me instantly, just as calculated, lowering me smoothly and silently to the crash pads below. But from above, from Brandon's perspective, it would look and sound like I'd fallen the full 15 feet onto concrete. I landed on the pads and immediately went still, playing dead, controlling my breathing. The pre-recorded sound effects I'd set up played through hidden speakers, a sickening thud, the sound of body hitting concrete, the clatter of the broken railing hitting the floor. Then, silence. The silence must have been deafening to Brandon. I kept my eyes closed, body completely motionless. Counted my heartbeats. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I heard it. Brandon's door opening. His footsteps in the hallway above. Not running, walking carefully, quietly. Coming to see if his plan had worked. "Mom?" Brandon called down from the top of the stairs. His voice was cautious, testing. No response from me. I lay perfectly still, barely breathing. I heard him come closer to the edge. Mom? Can you hear me? More silence. Then I heard him pull out his phone. Oh my God. Mom! Mom! Can you hear me? His voice was louder now, panicked sounding. I'm calling 911. Hold on. He was recording, creating his innocent son narrative, building his alibi. I could see it all in my mind, how he'd play this, the devoted son who'd tried to save his mother, who'd found her too late, who'd done everything he could. He'd cry at my funeral, tell everyone how much he loved me, how worried he'd been about me living alone, and then he'd collect my $4.5 million estate and move to Miami. The recording stopped. Silence again. And then I heard something that confirmed everything, that validated every aspect of this dangerous plan. Brandon laughed. Not loud, just a quiet, relieved exhale that became a soft laugh. Finally, he whispered, freaking finally. Relief. Pure relief in his voice. He thought I was dead, and he was glad. That's when Detective Chen's voice cut through the air like a knife. Chicago PD. Freeze. Don't move. Officers emerged from their hiding spots, weapons drawn. Brandon spun around, face going white, mouth falling open. What are you? I was just about to call 911. My mother fell. I sat up, slowly, deliberately, stood up, brushing off my clothes, looked up at my adopted son from the bottom of the stairs. Hello, Brandon. I'm not dead. His face went from white to gray to a sickly green color. But you fell. I saw. You saw what you wanted to see, what you planned to see when you saw it through that support beam yesterday. I walked up the side stairs, the normal ones, not the sabotaged staircase, taking my time letting him process what was happening. His eyes were wild, darting between me and the officers, his mind clearly racing to find some explanation, some way out. I pulled out my phone. You made a phone call yesterday afternoon, Brandon. In the guest room, right above the bathroom where I was working on the faucet. I hit play on the recording. Brandon's voice filled the house, clear and damning. The accident happens on the back stairs. I'll loosen the railing tonight. Saw partway through the support beam. When she puts her weight on it tomorrow morning, the whole thing gives way. 15-foot fall onto concrete basement floor. Head trauma. Looks completely natural. $4.5 million. This time tomorrow, problem solved. Brandon's face collapsed as he listened to his own words. His own voice describing in clinical detail how he planned to murder me. How did you? His voice was barely a whisper. Sound travels in old houses, Brandon, through the heating vents, through the old ductwork. I heard every word. I recorded it. Then I came down here and found where you'd already started sabotaging the stairs. I gestured to the broken railing, the sawn support beam all visible now in the morning light. I'm a structural engineer. Remember, I've spent 40 years analyzing exactly this kind of sabotage. I know what deliberate damage looks like, and I know how to document it. Detective Torres stepped forward, handcuffs ready. Brandon Sullivan, you are under arrest for attempted murder in the first degree, criminal damage to property with intent to cause harm, and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. This is insane. I didn't, Mom. Tell them this is a misunderstanding. I would never. I looked at him with complete calm. The calm of someone who'd spent years testifying in courtrooms, who knew how to control emotion and present facts. You saw through my staircase hoping I'd fall to my death so you could inherit $4.5 million. That's not a misunderstanding, Brandon. That's attempted murder. I would never hurt you. I love you. You stood at the top of those stairs, thought I was dead, and said freaking finally. That's not love, Brandon. That's relief that I was gone and you could take my money. He tried to run. The officers grabbed him before he made it 3 steps, wrestling him to the ground as he struggled and shouted, I'm sorry, Mom, please. I was desperate. I didn't mean. Yes, you did, I said quietly. You meant every single word. As they lifted him to his feet, hands cuffed behind his back, Brandon was crying. Please, Mom, please, they'll kill me if I don't pay. The loan sharks, they said they'd kill me. I had no choice. You had a choice. I said, you could have asked me for help. You could have filed for bankruptcy. You could have done 1,000 things that didn't involve planning my murder. You chose this, Brandon. You You chose to saw through my staircase and wait for me to fall to my death. That was your choice. They led him away, still screaming, still begging, his voice echoing through the house until the front door closed behind him. The house went quiet. Detective Chen stayed behind, making sure I was all right. That was incredibly brave, she said, and incredibly risky. I'm an engineer. I calculated the risks and made sure they were manageable. Still, not many people would have the composure to do what you just did, to let it play out like that. I looked at the sabotaged staircase, at the fresh saw marks in the support beam, at the broken railing lying on the basement floor. He's not my biological son, but I raised him from the time he was 8 years old. I loved him, helped him through everything, and he decided I was worth more dead than alive. I'm so sorry, Dorothy. So am I. The next 3 months were consumed by legal proceedings. Brandon was charged with attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, and criminal damage to property with intent to cause harm. The prosecution was led by Assistant State's Attorney Rachel Kim, a sharp, experienced prosecutor in her 40s who'd built her career on winning difficult cases. She came to meet with me a week after Brandon's arrest, sitting in my living room with files spread across my coffee table. Miss Sullivan, I want you to know this is one of the strongest attempted murder cases I've ever prosecuted. The evidence is overwhelming. She wasn't exaggerating. The audio recording of Brandon planning my murder in explicit, devastating detail, photographs of the sabotaged staircase accompanied by my expert structural analysis proving the damage had been deliberately engineered to cause catastrophic failure. Brandon's notebook with my daily schedule. His research on staging accidents, his sketch of the staircase with the fall point marked with an X. Video from 6 different camera angles showing Brandon at the top of the stairs after my fall, not calling for help immediately, not rushing down to check on me, but instead recording himself for his false narrative, then stopping the recording and laughing in relief. And perhaps most damning, Brandon's own confession during his interrogation. He'd broken down completely, admitted everything: the gambling debts, the desperation, the planning, the sabotage. His lawyer tried to mount a defense based on temporary insanity and duress. The argument was that Brandon had been driven to desperation by gambling debts totaling $300,000, that loan sharks had threatened his life, that his judgment had been impaired by fear and stress. The prosecution brought in a forensic accountant who meticulously documented Brandon's financial situation. Yes, he owed $300,000 to various casinos and private lenders. Yes, some of those lenders had made threats. But Brandon had other options. He could have filed for bankruptcy. He could have asked me for help. I would have helped him, perhaps not with the full amount, but I would have helped him find solutions. Instead, he'd chosen murder. He didn't choose the legal route, Rachel Kim said in her opening statement. He didn't choose the honest route. He didn't even choose to simply ask his mother for help. He chose to calculate her net worth, determine that she was worth $4.5 million dead, and meticulously plan her murder in a way he thought would look like an accident. That's not temporary insanity. That's not duress. That's cold, calculated, premeditated murder for financial gain. When it was my turn to testify, I walked into that courtroom with the same professional composure I'd maintained through decades of expert witness testimony. I walked the jury through everything. The phone call I'd overheard, the recording I'd made, the discovery of Brandon's notebook, the sabotaged staircase. I explained my engineering analysis in terms a layperson could understand: how the structural damage had been precisely calculated to cause maximum injury. How this wasn't accidental wear and tear but deliberate sabotage designed to kill. This wasn't a loose railing that happened to fail, I told the jury. This was a carefully engineered death trap. The support beam was sawn partway through at exactly the right point to cause catastrophic failure under a specific load. My body weight, the railing was loosened but left in place so it would feel secure until the critical moment. This required knowledge, planning, and deliberate malicious intent. The prosecutor played the audio recording. The jury sat in stunned silence as Brandon's voice filled the courtroom, describing in chilling detail how he planned to murder me, discussing my estate value, laughing about his problem being solved. Several jurors looked visibly shaken. When the recording ended, there were tears on some faces. Then they played the video from the morning of the attempt. The jury watched me descend the stairs, watched the railing give way, watched me fall, then watched Brandon come to the top of the stairs, watched him look down at what he thought was my dead body, watched him pull out his phone and record his performance. Oh my God, "Mom, I'm calling 911. And then watched him stop recording, look around to make sure no one was watching, and smile. Watched him whisper, freaking finally in relief. One juror put her hand over her mouth, eyes wide with horror. Another juror was shaking his head slowly, face pale. The defense attorney tried to argue that Brandon had been coerced by loan sharks, that he'd been living in constant fear for his life, that his judgment had been completely impaired. On cross-examination, Rachel Kim systematically destroyed every argument. "Mr. Sullivan, did the loan sharks tell you to murder your mother?" "No, but they wanted their money." "Did they suggest you sabotage her staircase?" "No, but I was desperate." "So this plan, this detailed, carefully researched, meticulously executed plan to stage your mother's death as an accident, that was entirely your idea?" Brandon hesitated. I didn't know what else to do." "You didn't know what else to do except murder the woman who raised you? The woman who took you in when you were orphaned at 8 years old? The woman who loved you, supported you financially and emotionally for 29 years? I was desperate. Desperate enough to spend days planning how to kill her. Desperate enough to study her routine, sketch her staircase, research how to stage accidents. Desperate enough to physically saw through structural supports in her home, while she slept upstairs. I didn't want to hurt her." "Then why did you laugh when you thought she was dead? Why did you say freaking finally? That doesn't sound like someone who didn't want to hurt her. That sounds like someone who was relieved his plan had worked." Brandon had no answer to that. He sat there, head in his hands, while the jury stared at him with expressions ranging from disgust to pity. When my victim impact statement came, I stood before the court and looked directly at Brandon. My voice was steady. I'd practiced this, knew exactly what I wanted to say. "Brandon, I adopted you when you were 8 years old, after your mother died. I took you into my home and into my heart. I raised you as my own son. I was there for every birthday, every school event, every milestone. I helped you through heartbreaks and celebrated your successes. I paid for your education. I supported you through business failures. I loved you unconditionally for 29 years. Brandon was crying, but I continued. "And you decided I was worth $4.5 million dead. You didn't just think about it in a moment of desperation. You planned it over days. You researched methods. You studied my routine. You physically sabotaged my home. You calculated exactly how to make my death look like an accident. You didn't plan to simply kill me. You planned to stand at my funeral and cry fake tears. To play the devastated son. To collect my money and move on with your life as if I'd never existed. That's not just attempted murder. That's the complete betrayal of everything a parent-child relationship should be. I raised you to be better than this. Clearly I failed. I have no son anymore. The boy I adopted, the young man I loved, he's gone. And the person sitting in that defendant's chair is a stranger who tried to kill me for money." The courtroom was silent. Brandon was sobbing openly now, but I felt nothing. No pity, no residual love, just emptiness. The jury deliberated for 5 hours. Later, I learned that some jurors had been troubled by the trap I'd set, uncomfortable with the idea that I'd let Brandon attempt the murder rather than just having him arrested based on the recording alone. But the evidence was simply too overwhelming. The verdict came back unanimous, guilty on all counts. Attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, criminal damage to property with intent to cause harm. Sentencing came 3 weeks later. Brandon's attorney argued for leniency, claiming Brandon deserved 15 years with possibility of parole, after 10, emphasizing his youth, his gambling addiction, the threats he'd faced. The prosecution argued for the maximum 30 years, citing the calculated nature of the crime, the elaborate planning, the complete lack of genuine remorse. I sat in the gallery and watched as Judge Patricia Morrison reviewed the case file one final time. She was a stern woman in her early 60s, known for thoughtful, carefully reasoned decisions. Finally, she looked up. "Mr. Sullivan, this court has presided over many difficult cases, but few as profoundly disturbing as this one." Brandon sat up straighter, hope flickering in his eyes. "You spent days meticulously planning your adoptive mother's murder. You researched methods online. You studied her daily routine. You sketched diagrams of her staircase. You physically sabotaged her home structure in a way specifically designed to cause her death while making it appear accidental. On the morning of the attempt, you waited to hear her fall. When you thought she was dead, you expressed relief. Not horror, not grief. Relief. Your attorney has argued that you were driven by gambling addiction and feared for your life. The court acknowledges that you face significant financial pressure. However, you had options available to you: bankruptcy, seeking help from your mother, addiction treatment. You chose none of these. Instead, you chose to murder the woman who'd raised you since you were 8 years old. The woman who'd given you a home, an education, unconditional love for nearly 3 decades. The mandatory minimum sentence for attempted murder in the first degree is 20 years. However, given the calculated, premeditated nature of this crime, the extensive planning involved, the particularly cruel betrayal of familial trust, and your complete lack of genuine remorse throughout this proceeding, I'm sentencing you to 25 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections. Brandon's face went pale. You'll be eligible for parole consideration after serving 18 years. That means you'll be 55 years old before you can even be considered for release. Perhaps those years will give you time to understand the magnitude of what you've done, to understand that you didn't just try to take your mother's life. You betrayed every principle of family loyalty and human decency. Court is adjourned. Brandon was led away, still sobbing, begging for mercy that wouldn't come. I sat in that courtroom and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no sense of victory, just a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. That was 6 months ago. I'm 70 years old now. I still live in my house in Bronzeville, in the home where Brandon tried to murder me. The first thing I did after the trial was have the back staircase completely rebuilt. Not just repaired, completely torn out and reconstructed according to my own specifications, with redundant safety features reinforced beyond any code requirement. Though I rarely use those stairs anymore, too many memories. The second thing I did was update my will. Brandon is completely explicitly disinherited. The will states clearly, due to his conviction for attempting to murder me, my adopted son Brandon Sullivan shall receive nothing from my estate under any circumstances. My $4.5 million estate now goes to 3 places. 40% to engineering scholarships for minority women at Northwestern University and MIT schools, that shaped my career and gave me the knowledge that ultimately saved my life. 30% to domestic violence shelters and organizations that help victims of family violence. Because I've learned that abuse isn't always physical, and sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones you loved most. 30% to the Legal Aid Society to help people who can't afford legal representation, because justice shouldn't be a luxury only the wealthy can afford. Brandon spent months planning to murder me for that money. Now he'll serve 25 years in prison knowing he'll never see a penny of it. The money he was willing to kill for will instead help hundreds of people he'll never meet. I also sold my story to a journalist for $50,000. Donated every cent to gambling addiction treatment programs. Maybe it'll help someone before they get desperate enough to do what Brandon did. The article went viral. The engineer who caught her son planning her murder appeared in magazines, online news sites, was shared millions of times on social media. I've been interviewed on 60 Minutes, featured on half a dozen true crime podcasts, quoted in engineering journals about forensic structural analysis. My inbox is constantly full of messages from people who say my story helped them recognize danger in their own families. One woman wrote, "I overheard my son-in-law discussing staging my accidental car crash. Because of your story, I knew exactly what to do. I recorded it and called the police. He's in jail now. You saved my life." Another wrote, "My daughter kept asking about my medications, my daily routine. It felt wrong, but I thought I was being paranoid. After reading your story, I contacted Adult Protective Services. They investigated and found she'd been adding things to my pills. Thank you for sharing what happened to you. Those letters are why I agreed to go public with my story. Not for fame, not for money, not even for some kind of catharsis. But because if sharing what happened to me can help even one person recognize danger and protect themselves, every uncomfortable interview and intrusive question is worth it. I also consult with Chicago PD now on suspected accident cases. When police investigate a death or serious injury that's been ruled accidental but something feels wrong, they call me. I've worked on 12 cases in the past 6 months. 5 of them turned out to be murder attempts, tempered staircases, loosened railings, sabotaged structures, deliberately weakened supports. 5 people are alive today because I helped prove what was done to them. 5 more would-be murderers are in prison because of my expert analysis. And I've helped bring closure to families of 3 victims whose deaths had been ruled accidental but were actually murders. I teach regular seminars for law enforcement, recognizing staged structural failures, an engineer's perspective. Detectives and investigators from across the Midwest attend. I walk them through case studies, show them what to look for, teach them the difference between natural deterioration and deliberate sabotage. I guest lecture at Northwestern, my alma mater, on forensic engineering and professional ethics. I show my students the pictures of my sabotaged staircase, play them the recording of Brandon planning my murder, explain how my engineering knowledge saved my life. Your technical knowledge isn't just for designing buildings, I tell them, it's for understanding how things fail. And sometimes that understanding can mean the difference between life and death, for you or for someone you can help. I mentor young female engineers, particularly women of color, telling them you're going to face people who underestimate you. Use that to your advantage. Be smarter than they think you are. Be more prepared. Be more thorough, and never, ever let anyone convince you that your knowledge isn't valuable. I'm also writing a book, The Fall That Never Was, an engineer's survival story. It's under contract with a major publisher, scheduled for release next spring. My agent tells me several universities want to use it in their engineering ethics courses, and multiple police departments have already ordered copies for their training libraries. All of this keeps me busy, gives me purpose, keeps me from dwelling too much on Brandon and what he became. But sometimes late at night when the house is quiet, I think about him anyway. I think about the 8-year-old boy who cried himself to sleep, calling for his mother, who I held and comforted and promised would be safe. I think about the teenager who told me he wanted to be an engineer like me, who sat at this kitchen table doing homework while I made dinner. I think about the young man I supported through college, who called me every Sunday just to talk. And I try to understand how that person became someone who would calculate my net worth and decide my death was worth $4.5 million. Where did I fail? What did I miss? What could I have done differently? My therapist tells me these aren't productive questions, that Brandon made his own choices, that I can't blame myself for his actions. Intellectually, I know she's right. Emotionally, I'll probably struggle with these questions for the rest of my life. Brandon is in Stateville Correctional Center now, serving his 25 years. I don't visit him, don't write to him, don't respond to his letters, and there have been many letters begging for forgiveness, asking me to restore his inheritance, claiming he's changed, he's learned, he's sorry. But Detective Chen keeps me updated. Brandon is having a difficult time in prison. He's accumulated more gambling debts. There are betting pools and card games even inside, owing money to people far more dangerous than casino loan sharks. He's been in several fights, spent multiple stints in solitary confinement. The irony isn't lost on me. He tried to murder me to escape his gambling debts, and now he's in prison accumulating more of them. Some people never learn. Some people keep making the same destructive choices over and over, no matter the consequences. Brandon is one of those people. He'll serve his time, probably most of it. Given his disciplinary record will likely disqualify him from early parole. He'll get out in his 50s with no money, no prospects, no family, no support system. The life he destroyed by choosing murder over honesty. That's not my problem anymore. My problem is living my life, using my knowledge to protect others, making sure that the years I have left count for something. This morning, like most mornings, I got a call from Detective Chen. Dorothy, we have a case. Elderly man found dead at the bottom of his basement stairs, 2 days ago. Family says it was an accident. He was known to be unsteady on his feet, but the daughter who found him has been asking pointed questions about his will. The insurance company flagged it. Can you take a look at the scene photos? Send them over, I'll do the analysis this morning. Thank you. You know, since you started consulting with us, we've prevented 6 murders and solved 4 that had been incorrectly ruled accidental. You're saving lives, Dorothy. Good. That's the point. I hung up and opened my laptop. The photos came through. A wooden staircase with a broken railing, an elderly man at the bottom in an unnatural position, family members in the background claiming he'd been increasingly frail, that they'd been worried this might happen. I zoomed in on the railing, examining the breakpoint. My practiced eye immediately spotted the telltale signs of tampering. The wood grain was wrong. The break was too clean. There were tool marks hidden in the splintered wood. I pulled out my notebook and started my detailed analysis, documenting everything the way I'd done for 40 years, the way that had saved my life. This is my purpose now. Not retirement, not quiet golden years spent in comfortable isolation, not family. I have no close family left after what Brandon did. But work. Justice. using every bit of expertise I've accumulated over 7 decades to catch people who think they can get away with murder. Brandon tried to kill me for $4.5 million. Instead, I'm using that money through scholarships, through shelters, through legal aid, to help hundreds of people build better lives. People who'll never know my adopted son tried to murder me, but who'll benefit from the legacy I'm building instead. That's not revenge. That's transformation. Taking something evil and turning it into something good. Taking betrayal and loss, and turning them into purpose. I'm 70 years old. My body is aging, my knees ache when it rains, my hands aren't as steady as they used to be, but my mind is still sharp. My knowledge is still valuable. My expertise can still save lives. I'll probably do this work until I physically can't anymore. And when I die naturally in my sleep, decades from now if I'm lucky, my estate will keep helping people long after I'm gone. Brandon gets nothing. That's justice. And I can live with that.